Like Aaron Brockovich or not, our town is largely undecided, and that's understandable because there's a lot of mistrust right now. But I've got to admit, she's got some smart cookies working with her. This is Bob Bocock discussing the aerosol machines in our creeks that I was talking about in an earlier video. Those aerosol machines, or I'll call them the aerators, they're pulling water out of the creek, spraying them up into the air, and then back into the creek. And what they're doing, they're pulling the chemicals out so that it aerosols or vaporizes them. I thought that was a bad idea right when I saw it. I talked about an earlier video where my wife got out of the car at the recycling center where one of these is located, and she immediately had burning eyes, a chemical taste in her mouth, and she got an instant headache, which lasted that entire day into the next day. Norfolk Southern either doesn't know what they're doing or they know what they're doing and they're being negligent, trying to get the chemicals out of the creek as quickly as possible to sweep this under the rug. But they're recontaminating us 24 hours a day by putting those chemicals back in the air. Please keep watching. Please be vigilant. And America, we need all the help we can get. We need all the attention we can get. We are being poisoned in our little community.
So I'm the environmental investigator. I've been working with Aaron Brockovich for over 25 years now, investigating these cases. Been literally several hundred times across this country on very similar cases. I don't know if you heard my presentation when Aaron and I were here the last time. This is very much like a train spill of the similar chemical in upstate New York. And that happened in 1970, and the federal government is still working on the cleanup. The final remediation plan for that cleanup in upstate New York is due August 2024. So that's a real confidence builder when you come to a community like this and you actually have lunch with we just met with a number of families here who've been absolutely devastated. They've had to move their businesses out of town, their homes out of town, their children out of town. And what's been the response? The railroad sent in a cleanup crew that came in with commercial grade organic Lysol, and they disinfected the homes. That's about as pathetic as it gets. The response is absolutely out of control. Nothing is going right in any way, shape, or form. If you look behind me here, they're actually aerating a creek. Where do you think those chemicals are going in an aeration process? They are literally going back up into the air and recontaminating these people. This is not something that happened overnight. This is something that's ongoing. They're literally taking the chemicals from this creek and reintroducing them into the air 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 3.5 weeks. Actually, tomorrow will be the 4th week. So this is not a emergency situation. This is an ongoing pollution and contamination of this community. And the fact that they have to continue to endure it, it's a concentrated site where this is occurring today, but for those of you that have driven around town, you'll see this going on in virtually every creek. There's one right up here across the street from the high school. They're doing it all around town. There are some type of a night burn that are actually going on down at the rail site that we have videotapes of. It's very distressing to see that this is how it's going to continue. So with that, I'll take some questions.
Have you done air testing at all to document any tangible documentation of what is in the air as a result of the aeration?
Okay, so what you're seeing out there, and this goes along the lines of, you know, I got to think of a really good adjective that just, I'm so frustrated I can't come up with one, but it's kind of like they're placating the community, okay? And so these air tests where you see people go in with those little yellow boxes and they do a sniffer, you know, that's not going to detect anything. Those are designed for people entering confined spaces to where the level of chemicals so high you suffocate, okay? Chronic exposure that causes cancer are at very low levels. We are getting data right now. I don't know if you read the work that was done by Texas A&M and the university that came up from there, and the testing that was done by Carnegie Mellon. The inventor of that equipment's on the cell phone right there. So he and I are going to be going around taking those tests over the next 10 days. Yes, sir.
You mentioned what's being done here. Yesterday, we had the opportunity to talk with the Ohio EPA director.
Yes.
Who explained the process of aerating, then churning the creek bed and vacuuming off what comes up that would be contaminating the creek. Are you in effect saying that the state doesn't know what it's doing in cleaning up the creek? Because they're taking it off, they say vacuuming it, putting it in those blue tanks. What you're suggesting is the state, which is overseeing this cleanup, doesn't seem to know what it's doing.
I would say the remediation response from the state and the federal government has been less than expected and less than standard. I don't know how he's vacuuming it off, because the aeration, I can see the water right there. That's water coming in contact with the air. Now, if they're vacuuming chemicals off the bottom, great. That would be fine. But the aeration process, the reason they're running those what look like sprinklers, they're fire nozzles up into the air, what that's doing is that's separating the chemical from the water and putting it into the air. I don't know how you vacuum that off.
Their argument is they aerate it first, then churn the creek bed. The aeration, they say, speeds the biological process of breaking up the compounds, and then churn up the creek bed to stir up what's there, because they know there's contamination in the creek bed. Stir that up. When it comes to the surface, they vacuum it off.
Right.
So again, you're saying that's not the way to do it?
I don't know how they're vacuuming it off. The fire sprinklers or the fire nozzle is pretty clear to me. I don't know what they're vacuuming off. And if they're anticipating increasing biological activity, that's not the way you do it either. So I haven't heard his explanation in order to counter it specifically. It's a she, yeah.
The director of the EPA saying this, so you're saying...
I'm saying I disagree.
What the EPA is doing is wrong.
Yes.